Meryl Streep, Hollywood's most decorated actress with her legendary talent and compassionate heart, has always believed that healthcare should be accessible and dignified for everyone, which is why she quietly invested millions to build Highland Memorial Hospital in her hometown. But when disturbing reports reach her about a doctor who's become notorious for humiliating patients based on their appearance and social status, she decides to go undercover as an ordinary patient to witness the truth herself. What she discovers will shake her to her core: an arrogant neurologist who mocks patients' concerns, rushes consultations, and treats the vulnerable with open contempt. As Meryl sits in the waiting room, disguised and unrecognized, watching this doctor shame a struggling mother with a sick child, her blood begins to boil. How long before the acclaimed actress reveals her true identity? And what will happen to the doctor who just humiliated the actual owner of the hospital? Stay with us to find out the shocking conclusion to this story of justice and compassion. And before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Meryl Streep stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan apartment, gazing at the city lights below while clutching a letter that had arrived that morning. Her face, which had portrayed countless emotions throughout her illustrious career, now displayed genuine concern. The letter, written in shaky handwriting on simple lined paper, was the fifth one she had received this month, all describing the same disturbing pattern at Highland Memorial Hospital. The hospital she had built, the hospital she owned. 8 years earlier, Meryl had watched helplessly as her beloved Aunt Eleanor was treated with callous indifference at a prestigious hospital, simply because she didn't look wealthy or important. "We're very busy today," the doctor had said dismissively, barely glancing at the elderly woman's symptoms before prescribing a generic medication and moving on. 2 days later, Eleanor was in intensive care with a condition that should have been caught immediately. Eleanor recovered, but the experience left an indelible mark on Meryl. Despite her fame and acclaim, the 3 Oscars, the record-breaking 21 nominations, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Meryl had always remained grounded in the values her parents had instilled in her, and one of those values was that every human being deserved dignity and respect, regardless of their social status. "This isn't right," she had told her financial advisor after her aunt's experience. "We need to do something." That something became Highland Memorial Hospital in her Connecticut hometown, built with $40 million of her own money and designed to be a model of compassionate care. Meryl had insisted on remaining an anonymous benefactor to most. Only a handful of board members knew the truth about the hospital's primary owner. "It's not about me," she'd explained. "It's about creating a place where everyone receives the same high standard of care, whether they arrive in a limousine or on foot." For the first few years, Highland Memorial had lived up to that vision. Meryl received monthly reports from the Q hospital administrator, Jackson Wells, detailing patient satisfaction scores, treatment outcomes, and community feedback. The reports were consistently positive, painting a picture of a healthcare facility that put people before profits. But then, 6 months ago, something changed. The reports remained glowing, even more so than before, but Meryl began receiving anonymous letters from patients and even a few staff members. The letters described a toxic environment where certain doctors, particularly a neurologist named Dr. Victor Harmon, openly discriminated against patients based on their appearance and perceived social worth. Meryl set the latest letter down on her desk and sighed. This one detailed how Dr. Harmon had rushed through an appointment with an elderly man experiencing stroke symptoms, dismissing him as just another hypochondriac wasting valuable time. The man had later collapsed in the parking lot and was now partially paralyzed. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Jackson Wells, right on schedule for their monthly update. "Everything is running smoothly, Miss Streep," Wells assured her, his voice polished and confident. "Patient satisfaction is at 92%, and Dr. Harmon continues to see more patients than any other specialist, keeping our efficiency ratings at the top of state rankings." Meryl's grip tightened on the phone. "And what about patient outcomes, Jackson? How are those looking, especially for those without premium insurance?" There was a brief pause. All within expected parameters, Mrs. Streep. Nothing to worry about. After ending the call, Meryl walked to her dining room table where she had spread out all the anonymous letters she'd received. Something wasn't adding up. Either these letters were fabrications, or Jackson Wells was hiding serious problems at Highland Memorial. Her gaze fell on a framed photo taken at the hospital's opening. She stood beside her Aunt Eleanor, both of them beaming with pride at what the hospital represented, a promise of equal care for all. "This isn't what we built," Meryl whispered to herself. She could, of course, simply order an investigation or fire Dr. Harmon based on the complaints, but Meryl Streep had built her career on understanding human behavior, on seeing beneath the surface to the truth of a situation. She needed to witness this herself, to understand not just what was happening but why it was being allowed to continue. The idea came to her suddenly, and once it took root, she couldn't dismiss it. She would go to Highland Memorial Hospital herself, not as Meryl Streep, the famous actress and owner, but as an ordinary patient seeking care. Meryl walked to her bathroom and studied her reflection. With the right changes, no makeup, different hairstyle, simple clothing, she could become anonymous. It wouldn't be her most challenging role, but it might be her most important. She made a few calls, arranging for an appointment at Highland Memorial under the name Mary Stevens. She researched symptoms that would require seeing a neurologist, carefully memorizing the details of chronic migraines and vision disturbances. 2 days later, Meryl stood in her closet, pushing aside designer dresses to find the plainest, most ordinary clothes she owned. She selected a pair of faded jeans, a simple grey sweater with a small coffee stain near the hem, and worn sneakers she used for gardening at her country home. In the bathroom, she pulled her hair back into a simple ponytail, applied no makeup, and added a pair of drugstore reading glasses. The transformation was remarkable. Not the glamorous star from magazine covers, but an ordinary middle-aged woman, perhaps a teacher or office worker, someone who might struggle to pay medical bills. As she grabbed her worn canvas tote bag and headed for the door, Meryl felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. If the letters were accurate, she was about to witness healthcare at its worst. But if that was the case, she was also in a unique position to fix it. "Time to see what's really happening at my hospital," she murmured, as she closed the door behind her, ready to step into her most consequential role yet. Highland Memorial Hospital stood impressively against the morning sky, its modern glass facade reflecting the sunlight. To most visitors, it represented hope and healing. To Meryl, disguised as ordinary Mary Stevens, it now represented a mystery she needed to solve. She parked her rented Honda Civic, deliberately chosen for its nondescript appearance, in the general parking area, avoiding the valet service she had insisted on providing for patients who needed it. As she walked toward the entrance, she observed how different the experience felt without the VIP treatment she normally received. Pushing through the revolving doors, Meryl entered the spacious lobby she had helped design. The original vision had been a welcoming space with comfortable seating areas, calming artwork, and clear signage to reduce the anxiety patients often felt. Much of that remained intact, but something in the atmosphere had changed. There was a tension that hadn't existed before. She approached the reception desk, where a young woman was typing rapidly, her eyes fixed on the computer screen. "Excuse me," Meryl said, softening her distinctive voice slightly. "I have an appointment." The receptionist glanced up briefly. "Name?" "Mary Stevens. ID and insurance card." Meryl handed over the carefully prepared identification and the insurance card her assistant had arranged. Legitimate, but indicating basic coverage rather than premium. The receptionist frowned slightly as she scanned the insurance information. "You're seeing Dr. Harmon for migraines?" Her tone implied this was an inconvenience. "Yes, they've been getting worse," Meryl replied, intentionally making her voice sound strained. "Fill these out completely," the receptionist said, sliding a clipboard toward her without making eye contact. "Wait time is approximately 2 hours." 2 hours? But my appointment is for... That's just how it works. The receptionist cut her off. "Dr. Harmon is very busy. Take a seat." Meryl took the clipboard and found a place in the waiting area. As she filled out the forms, she discreetly observed the dynamics around her. The waiting room was divided into two distinct sections, though not by any visible markers. One area, closer to the consultation rooms, was occupied by well-dressed patients who were attended to promptly. The other area, where Meryl sat, was filled with people who appeared less affluent, many of whom had clearly been waiting for hours. An elderly man sat across from her, his face drawn with pain. He had been there when she arrived, and based on his resigned expression had been waiting a long time. Beside him, a middle-aged woman in scrubs, likely coming straight from her own healthcare job, checked her watch repeatedly, anxiety evident in her movements. "Excuse me," the elderly man called to a passing nurse. "I've been waiting 3 hours. My appointment was at 9, Sue." The nurse barely paused. "We're running behind. Dr. Harmon will see you when he can." As the morning progressed, Meryl witnessed a series of concerning interactions. A young mother arrived with a child who was clearly in distress, pale and lethargic. When she approached the reception desk to ask if they could be seen urgently, she was told curtly to wait like everyone else. "But my son's pediatrician sent us here specifically," the mother explained, her voice breaking. "He said Dr. Harmon needs to rule out neurological causes." "And he will," the receptionist replied, "when it's your turn." The mother returned to her seat, cradling her son and fighting back tears. Meanwhile, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit walked directly to the reception desk. The same receptionist who had been cold to others immediately brightened. "Mr. Davidson, Dr. Harmon is expecting you. Go right through." Meryl felt her stomach tighten. This was not what she had envisioned for her hospital. After about an hour, a nurse's aide came to check on the elderly man, whose breathing had become labored. Meryl watched as the young woman took his blood pressure, her face betraying concern. When the aide passed by Meryl to retrieve something from the nurse's station, Meryl gently touched her arm. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked quietly. The aide looked around cautiously before responding. "He should have been seen hours ago. His blood pressure is dangerously high. Why hasn't he been taken in?" The aide hesitated, then whispered, "Dr. Harmon has a list. Patients he sees first regardless of appointment time or medical need." "Based on what?" Meryl asked, though she already suspected the answer. "On who they are," the aide replied simply. "I shouldn't be telling you this. I need this job." "I understand," Meryl assured her. "Thank you for caring." The aide smiled sadly. "I became a healthcare worker to help people, but around here that can get you in trouble." As the aide walked away, Meryl noticed the young mother with the sick child approaching the reception desk again, desperation evident in her posture. "Please," she begged. "It's been 2 hours. My son's headaches are getting worse. He can't even keep water down now." The receptionist sighed dramatically. "If you can't wait, you can try the urgent care center on Maple Street." "But they sent us here," the mother cried. "They said he needs a neurologist." Nearby patients looked up, uncomfortable witnesses to her distress. Some averted their eyes while others watched with sympathy. A door opened and a tall man in a pristine white coat emerged. Dr. Victor Harmon, Meryl presumed. His appearance matched the description in the letters, immaculately dressed with an air of arrogance that seemed to precede him. He glanced at the commotion, his expression hardening when he saw the mother and child. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the waiting room. The receptionist lowered her voice, but Meryl could still hear. "She's demanding to be seen ahead of schedule, claims it's urgent." Dr. Harmon approached, towering over the mother. "Ma'am, creating a scene won't get you seen any faster. Everyone here has problems." The mother shrank back. "I'm sorry, doctor, but my son will be seen when it's his turn," Dr. Harmon finished firmly, "or you can go elsewhere." As he turned away, he nodded to the well-dressed man who had arrived. After Meryl, but had already been seen. "Mr. Davidson, we'll schedule that follow-up for next week, premium slot, of course." Meryl felt a mixture of shock and anger rising within her. The contrast between the hospital's mission and its current reality couldn't have been starker. "Stevens," a nurse called. "Mary Stevens?" Meryl stood, gathering her bag. As she walked toward the examination area, she passed the young mother who had returned to her seat, now silently weeping as she held her son. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Meryl made a silent promise. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. It was a mission to reclaim the soul of Highland Memorial Hospital. The nurse led Meryl down a corridor lined with framed medical diplomas and awards. She noticed how the hallway's appearance gradually transformed, becoming more polished and well-maintained as they approached Dr. Harmon's office. Even the lighting seemed better here, a stark contrast to the dimmer fluorescent bulbs in the general waiting area. "Wait in here," the nurse instructed, gesturing to an examination room. "Dr. Harmon will be with you shortly." Meryl thanked her and stepped inside. The examination room was immaculate, with state-of-the-art equipment she recognized from the hospital's original outfitting. She sat on the edge of the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her. On the counter, she spotted a framed photograph of Dr. Harmon shaking hands with Jackson Wells, the hospital administrator who had been sending her those suspiciously perfect reports. 20 minutes passed, then 30. She could hear Dr. Harmon's voice from neighboring rooms, spending considerable time with certain patients, while rushing through others in mere minutes. The pattern was becoming clear. Finally, the door swung open. Dr. Harmon entered, his eyes fixed on a tablet in his hands, not bothering to look up at her. "Mrs. Stevens," he said flatly. "Migraines, correct?" "Yes," Meryl replied intentionally, making her voice sound strained. "They've been getting worse over the past few months, sometimes with visual disturbances." Dr. Harmon glanced up briefly, his eyes scanning her worn clothes and simple appearance before returning to his tablet. The assessment had taken less than a second, but in that moment, Meryl knew she had been categorized, deemed unworthy of his full attention. "How often do these headaches occur?" he asked, still not making eye contact. 3 or 4 times a week. "Now, pain level," he interrupted. "Sometimes so severe I can't function. I've had to miss work and—" On a scale of 1 to 10, he cut her off again, impatience evident in his tone. Meryl took a deep breath. 8 or 9 during the worst episodes. Dr. Harmon finally set down his tablet and approached her with a stethoscope, listening to her heart for barely 5 seconds before moving on to a perfunctory check of her pupils. "Any family history of neurological conditions?" he asked, already stepping back. "My mother had similar symptoms. She was eventually diagnosed with—" "Just yes or no is fine," he interrupted, returning to his tablet. Meryl felt her jaw tighten, but maintained her composure. "Yes, there is a family history." Dr. Harmon nodded absently, typing something. The examination had lasted less than 2 minutes, and he had barely touched her or looked at her directly. "I'll prescribe something for the pain," he said, already moving toward the door. "Basic migraine protocol. Shouldn't there be some tests?" Meryl asked. "My doctor suggested an MRI might be—" Dr. Harmon turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Did you attend medical school, Mrs. Stevens?" The condescension in his voice was palpable. "No, but then perhaps you should leave the medical decisions to those who did." His smile was cold, practiced. "MRIs are expensive procedures. Given your insurance situation, I'd recommend starting with medication." Meryl noticed how he glanced at her simple wedding band, a prop she'd chosen specifically for her disguise, as if assessing its value. "Cost isn't my primary concern," she said carefully. "I'm worried about the underlying cause." Dr. Harmon sighed dramatically, checking his watch. "Look, Mrs. Stevens, I see dozens of patients like you every day. Common migraines, tension headaches, they all think they have a brain tumor, they don't. But the visual disturbances are classic migraine symptoms," he finished for her. "Take the medication. If it doesn't help after 6 weeks, we can discuss further options." 6 weeks. Meryl knew from her research that certain neurological conditions could worsen significantly in that time frame. If she were actually suffering from something serious, his casual dismissal could have devastating consequences. "I understand you're busy," she persisted, "but I've been experiencing numbness in my right hand during these episodes." For the first time, Dr. Harmon seemed to falter slightly. That symptom, which Meryl had deliberately held back until now, clearly warranted more attention. He recovered quickly. "Likely nerve compression, nothing serious." "You can determine that without any tests?" Meryl asked, her tone innocent but the question pointed. Dr. Harmon's expression hardened. "Mrs. Stevens, Highland Memorial is an exceptional facility with limited resources. We have to prioritize. Prioritize what exactly? She asked. Patients. With clear medical necessity, he replied stiffly. And you've determined I don't qualify in under 3 minutes? The doctor's posture changed, becoming more defensive. I don't appreciate my medical judgment being questioned by patients who get their information from WebMD. Just then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his demeanor transformed instantly. Excuse me, he said, suddenly all politeness. I need to take this. He stepped outside, but Meryl could hear his voice through the door. Yes, Mrs. Cartwright. Of course I can see Jonathan this afternoon. No, it's no trouble at all. We always have room for the Cartwright family. When he returned, his professional mask was back in place, though noticeably cooler. As I was saying, Mrs. Stevens, I'm prescribing sumatriptan for your migraines. Standard dosage. He was already writing on his prescription pad. Any pharmacy can fill it. And if that doesn't work, Meryl pressed. Meryl. Then call the office for a follow-up. He tore off the prescription and handed it to her. Though our schedule is quite full for the next 2 months. 2 months. For patients like Mary Stevens, the wait was interminable. For the Cartwrights, of the world, there was always room. As Dr. Harmon reached for the door handle, Meryl asked one final question. Doctor, what is Highland Memorial's mission statement? He paused, visibly confused by the unexpected query. Excuse me? The hospital's mission statement, Meryl repeated calmly. What is it? Dr. Harmon frowned, seemingly trying to recall. Something. About excellence in healthcare, I believe. Why? Just curious, Meryl replied softly. In fact, she had written that mission statement herself. To provide compassionate, equitable care to all members of our community, regardless of background or circumstance. Dr. Harmon clearly had no idea. As he left the room with a curt, "The nurse will see you out," Meryl remained seated, her mind racing. What she'd just experienced wasn't simply a doctor having a bad day, it was systematic discrimination, sanctioned from above. Outside the examination room, she could hear Dr. Harmon warmly greeting his next patient. "Mr. Richardson, how's that golf swing coming along?" Laughter, camaraderie, respect, all reserved for the right kind of patient. Meryl carefully folded the prescription and placed it in her bag. She had seen enough of Dr. Harmon's approach, but her investigation was far from complete. The problem went beyond one arrogant doctor. It reached into the very management of her hospital. She stepped out of the examination room, her face revealing nothing of the determination now hardening within her. Phase 1 was complete. It was time for Phase 2. Instead of leaving Highland Memorial after her appointment, Meryl made her way back to the waiting area. She found a seat in the corner, pulled out a dog-eared paperback from her bag, a prop she'd chosen specifically for her disguise, and pretended to read while observing the dynamics around her. The young mother with the sick child was still waiting, her son now sleeping restlessly against her shoulder. The elderly man had finally been called in, but had returned to the waiting room, looking confused and upset as he studied a prescription. Meryl's instincts told her to stay and watch. As an actress, she had spent decades studying human behavior, finding the truth in every character she portrayed. Now she was witnessing a performance of sorts, the carefully maintained facade of Highland Memorial Hospital and the reality behind it. A new patient entered, a woman in her 30s, smartly, dressed in business attire, accompanied by a teenage girl who walked with a slight limp and winced occasionally. The woman approached the reception desk. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm Elena Diaz. My daughter Sophia has an appointment with Dr. Harmon." The receptionist checked her computer. "Diaz? Yes, I see you here. Insurance?" Elena handed over a card. The receptionist's expression changed subtly as she processed it. "Take a seat, it might be a while." Elena glanced at her daughter, concern evident. The referral said it was urgent. Her symptoms have been getting worse. The receptionist's face remained impassive. "Everyone here has urgent issues, ma'am." They sat down across from Meryl. Sophia leaned against her mother, eyes closed in pain. Elena stroked her daughter's hair, whispering reassurances. After a few minutes, Meryl gently introduced herself as Mary. "Is your daughter okay?" she asked quietly. Elena sighed. She's been having severe headaches and balance problems for weeks. Her pediatrician is concerned enough that he referred us directly to a neurologist, said we shouldn't wait. Has she seen any other doctors? 3, Elena replied. They all ordered tests, but our insurance requires a referral from a specialist, like Dr. Harmon, before they'll cover the cost of an MRI. Meryl nodded sympathetically, her mind calculating the bureaucratic maze this woman was being forced to navigate. An hour passed. The waiting room had mostly cleared out, yet Elena and Sophia continued to wait. Meanwhile, Meryl observed several patients arrive, check in, and be seen promptly. The pattern was unmistakable, those with premium insurance or connections barely waited at all. Finally, a nurse called, "Sophia Diaz." Eleanor helped her daughter stand, supporting her as they walked toward the examination room. Meryl waited, continuing her silent observation. Less than 10 minutes later, Eleanor and Sophia emerged. The teenager was crying softly, and her mother's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. They gathered their belongings, and Elena guided her daughter toward the exit. On impulse, Meryl followed them, catching up in the parking lot. "Elena," she called gently, "I couldn't help noticing you weren't in there very long. Is everything okay?" Elena turned, tears of frustration now visible in her eyes. He barely looked at her. 10 minutes. That's all he gave us after waiting for hours. Said she's just having teenage anxiety and prescribed antidepressants. "Without any tests?" Meryl asked, though she already knew the answer. He said the tests would be inappropriate. Resource allocation given her symptoms. Elena's voice broke. But he didn't even properly evaluate her symptoms. He interrupted every time Sophia tried to explain how the room spins, how she sometimes can't feel her feet. Sophia leaned more heavily against her mother, suddenly paler than before. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't feel good." The girl's legs buckled. Meryl rushed forward, helping Elena lower her daughter gently to the ground. Sophia's eyes had rolled back, her body suddenly rigid. "She's having a seizure," Meryl said, quickly moving to turn the girl onto her side. "How long has this been happening?" "It's the first time," Elena cried. "Oh God, what do I do?" Meryl had researched neurological symptoms thoroughly for a role. Years ago, she recognized what was happening. "We need to get her back inside," she said firmly. "Now." Together, they carried Sophia back to the emergency entrance. A nurse saw them and immediately brought a gurney. As they rushed Sophia inside, Meryl explained what had happened. "Dr. Harmon just saw her," she added. "He diagnosed anxiety and refused further testing." The emergency doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, frowned. "I'm ordering a CT scan immediately." Elena stayed with her daughter while Meryl waited outside. 20 minutes later, the emergency doctor emerged, her expression grave. "Mrs. Diaz has given me permission to update you," she told Meryl. "Sophia has a brain mass that's causing increased intracranial pressure. That's what triggered the seizure. We're transferring her to neurosurgery right away." Meryl felt cold anger spreading through her chest. "Dr. Harmon missed this." The doctor hesitated, clearly uncomfortable criticizing a colleague. "It would have been evident with proper testing, which he refused to order," Meryl finished. "I shouldn't comment further," the doctor said carefully. "But yes, this is not something that should have been mistaken for anxiety." Meryl thanked her and went to find Elena, who was sitting beside her unconscious daughter, as nurses prepared her for transfer. "They found a mass," Elena whispered, her voice hollow with shock. "If she hadn't collapsed right there in the parking lot." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "Eleanor," Meryl said gently, "I know this is a terrible time, but may I ask you something? Has anyone from hospital administration contacted you about your experience with Dr. Harmon?" Eleanor laughed bitterly. "Complained about him twice before. Nothing ever happened. Would you be willing to document what occurred today? Why? What difference would it make?" Meryl chose her words carefully. "I believe there are serious problems at this hospital that need to be addressed. Your experience could help prevent this from happening to other families." Eleanor studied Meryl's face. "Who are you, really? You don't seem like just another patient." "Someone who cares deeply about making sure this hospital lives up to its promise," Meryl replied honestly. "Will you help me?" After a moment, Eleanor nodded. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure no other mother goes through this. Dr. Harmon should never be allowed to dismiss a child's symptoms like that again. As nurses came to take Sophia to surgery, Meryl stepped back, her resolve hardening. What she had witnessed wasn't just arrogance or prejudice. It was dangerous negligence. That could have cost a young girl her life. Now she had proof. And Dr. Victor Harmon's days at Highland Memorial were numbered. The next morning, Meryl returned to Highland Memorial, this time positioning herself strategically in the hospital cafeteria. She had chosen a different outfit, still simple and unassuming, but different enough that casual observers wouldn't connect her with Mary Stevens from the previous day. Her hair was tucked under a plain scarf, and she wore different glasses. She sat at a corner table with a cup of tea and a notebook, appearing to anyone watching like a patient's relative taking a break. In reality, she was listening carefully to the conversations around her, particularly those of the hospital staff. A group of nurses sat at a nearby table, their voices low but audible. Meryl recognized one of them as the woman who had assisted Dr. Harmon during her appointment. "Did you hear about the Diaz girl?" one nurse asked. Dr. Cassidy in emergency caught what Harmon missed. The poor kid had a tumor the size of a golf ball. The others exchanged knowing glances. "Not surprised," another replied. "Harmon spent, 10 minutes with her?" 8, said the nurse Meryl recognized. "I timed it. He decided it was anxiety before she even finished describing her symptoms. Meanwhile, he spent 45 minutes with Senator Wilson's wife, discussing her mild tension headaches." They all fell silent as an administrator walked past their table, exchanging looks that spoke volumes about the culture of fear at Highland Memorial. When the administrator was gone, one nurse leaned in. "Dr. Miller tried to report him last month. After the Henderson case, suddenly her schedule got cut to part-time. That's why nobody speaks up anymore," the first nurse said. "Harmon has friends in administration. He plays golf with Wells every Saturday." Meryl made a mental note. Jackson Wells, the hospital administrator who sent her those glowing reports, was evidently close friends with Dr. Harmon. After the nurses dispersed, Meryl walked through the hospital, observing interactions and occasionally asking innocent questions about services and departments. In the physical therapy wing, she paused to read a bulletin board displaying staff achievements. Among the announcements was a small article about a neurologist named Dr. Anita Sharma, whose application to join Highland Memorial had recently been rejected despite her impressive credentials. The name sounded familiar. Meryl remembered recommending Dr. Sharma herself after meeting her at a charity event, a brilliant young neurologist who had developed innovative approaches to treating patients with limited access to healthcare. Meryl found a quiet corridor and made a phone call to her assistant, speaking quietly. "I need information on Dr. Anita Sharma. She applied for a position at Highland Memorial but was rejected. Find out why." While waiting, Meryl continued her exploration, eventually finding herself near the billing department. A heated conversation caught her attention. "This can't be right," a middle-aged man was saying, waving a bill in frustration. "All Dr. Harmon did was talk to my mother for 5 minutes and prescribe the same medication she was already taking. How can he bill for a comprehensive neurological consultation?" The billing clerk looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't make these determinations. The doctor codes the visit and we process accordingly." $5,000 for 5 minutes, the man exclaimed. "This is robbery." "You can file a complaint," the clerk offered weakly. "I already did, 3 weeks ago." Nothing happened. Meryl quietly retreated, processing what she'd heard. Overcharging. For services not rendered wasn't just unethical, it was potentially fraudulent. Her phone vibrated with a text from her assistant. Dr. Sharma rejected despite unanimous support from medical committee. Final decision made by J. Wells alone. Cited cultural fit issues. Meryl's jaw tightened. The picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing by the hour. She made her way to the hospital's records department, where her status as owner would grant her access to internal documents if she revealed herself. But she wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, she took a different approach. She found a young clerk working alone, and adopted the polite but slightly confused demeanor that had helped her play so many relatable characters over the years. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm helping with a patient satisfaction survey. Could you point me to where your complaint records are kept?" The clerk looked up, hesitant. "Those are confidential." "Are you from administration?" Meryl smiled warmly. "Quality assurance. We're reviewing patterns in patient feedback." She had carefully chosen an identification badge from another hospital for her disguise, counting on the clerk's reluctance to challenge someone who seemed official. The small deception worked. "The digital records are password protected," the clerk said, "but the written complaints are filed there." He pointed to a cabinet. "They get entered into the system every Friday." "Perfect, thank you. I'll just take a quick look." Once the clerk returned to his work, Meryl discreetly examined the files. What she found was shocking. Dozens of complaints against Dr. Harmon, dating back months, all filed but never processed further. Many detailed experiences similar to what she had witnessed: rushed consultations, dismissal of symptoms, preferential treatment, and even misdiagnoses. More disturbing still was a pattern she noticed in the handling of these complaints. Each folder contained a small note with the same notation: NFA per JW. No further action per Jackson Wells. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from her assistant. "Found something. Dr. Harmon's brother-in-law is on Highland Memorial's board of directors." The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about one arrogant doctor. It was systematic corruption involving the highest levels of hospital management. As Meryl carefully returned the files, a nurse hurried into the records room, looking distressed. She didn't notice Meryl at first, focused on retrieving a folder from another cabinet. Meryl recognized her as Sarah, one of the nurses she had observed with Dr. Harmon. She looked upset, her hands trembling slightly as she searched through files. You all right?" Meryl asked gently. Sarah startled, then composed herself. "Yes, fine, just looking for a patient history." Meryl took a chance. "It seems stressful working here." Something in her tone must have resonated with Sarah, who paused and really looked at Meryl for the first time. "It didn't used to be," she said quietly. "This hospital was different when it opened. The mission meant something then." "What changed?" Sarah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "People like Dr. Harmon happened. And administrators who care more about numbers than patients. Have you tried reporting problems?" A bitter smile crossed Sarah's face. "3 times. The last time my hours were cut, and I was transferred to the night shift. I have 2 kids. I can't afford to lose this job." Meryl nodded, understanding. "What if someone with real power was listening? What would you want them to know?" Sarah studied her with newfound curiosity. "Who are you, really?" "Someone who believes Highland Memorial can be what it was meant to be," Meryl answered truthfully. "Someone who has the power to make that happen." For a moment, Sarah seemed to consider the possibility, hope flickering across her face. Then she shook her head. "It doesn't matter who you are, the system's too broken. Dr. Harmon is just a symptom of a bigger disease." As Sarah left with her files, Meryl knew she had gathered enough evidence. The next phase would require her to reveal herself, but not before she witnessed one final interaction that would leave no doubt about the changes needed at Highland Memorial. Meryl had just returned to the main reception area when commotion erupted near the entrance. An elderly man had collapsed on the floor, his wife frantically calling for help. "Please, someone help him. I think he's having a stroke." Several nurses rushed forward, kneeling beside the man. His face was drooping on one side, and he couldn't speak clearly. Classic stroke symptoms that Meryl recognized immediately. "Page Dr. Harmon," one nurse called out. "Potential stroke in the lobby." As the nurses worked to stabilize the patient, Meryl observed Dr. Harmon walking unhurriedly down the corridor, coffee cup in hand. He glanced at the scene, sighed visibly, and approached with obvious reluctance. "What do we have?" he asked, not kneeling to examine the patient. "Symptoms consistent with stroke, doctor," a young female resident explained urgently. "Left facial droop, slurred speech, left arm weakness. Onset approximately 3 minutes ago." Dr. Harmon took a sip of his coffee. "Is he on our patient roster?" The resident looked confused. No, he collapsed in the lobby. He needs immediate. Then he should be taken to the ER, Dr. Harmon interrupted. This isn't an emergency room. We have protocols. But, sir, the resident persisted, you're the neurologist on call. The ER team will need your assessment, and time is critical with stroke. We're losing the treatment window. Dr. Harmon's expression hardened. Are you telling me how to do my job, Dr. Chen? The resident faltered, clearly intimidated but unwilling to back down when a patient's life was at stake. No, sir. I'm just concerned about the time-sensitive nature of... Your concern is noted. Dr. Harmon cut her off coldly. Now call the ER and have them send a team up to transport him. I'll assess him once he's properly admitted. The resident's face showed her shock. But that could take... That's the protocol, Dr. Chen. If you can't follow it, perhaps neurology isn't for you. Meryl watched as the young doctor's expression shifted from shock to determination. Dr. Chen turned back to the patient, continuing emergency measures, while another nurse made the call. I'm not leaving him, Dr. Chen stated firmly. Every minute counts with stroke. Dr. Harmon's face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake, Chen. This insubordination will be noted in your evaluation. The young resident didn't respond, focused entirely on the patient. Dr. Harmon turned and walked away, telling the receptionist to notify him when the patient was properly situated in the ER. Meryl had seen enough. She stepped forward, approaching. Dr. Chen, is there anything I can do to help? She asked quietly. The resident was checking the patient's vital signs. Actually, yes. Can you comfort his wife? She's understandably distraught. Meryl nodded and moved to the elderly woman's side, gently taking her hand. The doctor is doing everything she can, she assured her. What's your husband's name? Frank, the woman replied tearfully. We've been married for 52 years. Frank is getting excellent care from Dr. Chen, Meryl said, loud enough for others to hear. She's not letting protocols get in the way of proper treatment. Several staff members glanced at her, surprised by her pointed comment. The ER team arrived minutes later, and Dr. Chen provided a thorough briefing as they prepared to transport Frank. Before they left, she promised his wife she would personally follow up on his case. When the emergency team had gone, Meryl approached Dr. Chen. That was impressive, she said sincerely. Standing up for your patient like that? Dr. Chen looked exhausted. It shouldn't be impressive. It should be standard procedure. She lowered her voice. But I've probably just ended my residency here. Because you did the right thing. Because I challenged Dr. Harmon. No one does that and survives professionally. Another doctor hurried up to them, looking concerned. Lily, Harmon is already talking to Wells about you. This doesn't look good. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. I know, Marcus. But what was I supposed to do? Let that man die in the lobby because of some arbitrary protocol? Of course not, Marcus replied. I'm just warning you, prepare yourself. Harmon has ended careers for less. As they spoke, Meryl noticed Dr. Harmon returning with a man she recognized from photographs as Jackson Wells, the hospital administrator. Their expressions were stern as they approached Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen, Wells began formally, Dr. Harmon tells me you directly violated hospital protocol and undermined his authority. I was following the stroke response protocol, sir, Dr. Chen responded calmly. Time is critical in stroke cases. The patient needed immediate neurological assessment. The protocol, Wells emphasized, is for non-emergency patients to be properly admitted through appropriate channels. He was having a stroke in our lobby, Dr. Chen replied, her voice steady despite her evident stress. That is, by definition, an emergency. Wells frowned. Nevertheless, there's a chain of command that must be respected. Meryl could no longer remain silent. She stepped forward, positioning herself beside Dr. Chen. Excuse me, she interjected. I witnessed everything that happened. This doctor quite possibly saved that man's life by acting quickly, while Dr. Harmon refused to assess him. Wells turned to her with barely concealed irritation. Ma'am, this is a personnel matter that doesn't concern... Actually, Meryl interrupted, her voice now firm and clear, no longer disguising its distinctive cadence. It very much concerns me. Something in her tone made Wells pause. He looked at her more carefully, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. Do I know you? He asked uncertainly. Dr. Harmon rolled his eyes. She's nobody. Just another patient who thinks watching medical shows qualifies her to have an opinion. Meryl smiled slightly. Is that what you think, Dr. Harmon, that I'm nobody? She reached up and removed her scarf and glasses, standing straight with the poise and presence that had commanded screens and stages for decades. The effect was immediate. Recognition dawned on Jackson Wells's face, followed quickly by alarm. Dr. Chen and her colleague Marcus stared in astonishment. "Ms. Streep," Wells stammered, "we had no idea you were visiting today." "Clearly," Meryl replied coolly. "If you had known, I imagine, Dr. Harmon would have been instructed to treat all patients with dignity, not just the wealthy ones." Dr. Harmon's face had drained of color. "Meryl Streep," he managed to say, "what are you doing here?" "Observing how my hospital is being run," she answered, her voice quiet but commanding. "And I must say I'm profoundly disappointed." A small crowd of staff had gathered, watching the scene unfold with stunned expressions. "Your hospital?" Dr. Harmon repeated weakly. "Yes, Dr. Harmon, my hospital. The one I founded to provide compassionate care to everyone regardless of their status or wealth." She turned to Dr. Chen. "Thank you for upholding that mission, even when others abandoned it." Wells attempted to regain control of the situation. "Miss Streep, I can explain—" "I look forward to your explanation, Mr. Wells," Meryl cut him off, "along with explanations about ignored patient complaints, fraudulent billing practices, and the rejection of qualified doctors like Anita Sharma. All matters we'll discuss in detail tomorrow morning at an emergency board meeting which I've already called." She turned back to Dr. Harmon, whose arrogance had evaporated, replaced by undisguised fear. "As for you, Dr. Harmon, I suggest you use the next 24 hours to reflect on your conduct. You'll have ample opportunity to defend your actions before the board." With that, Meryl turned and walked away, leaving stunned silence in her wake. The breaking point had come, and the reckoning was about to begin. Meryl returned to her hotel. Sweet, her mind racing with everything she had witnessed over the past 2 days. The luxury accommodations felt jarring after immersing herself in the role of Mary Stevens. She removed the last vestiges of her disguise and stood before the mirror, once again Meryl Streep, not just the acclaimed actress, but the woman who was about to reclaim her hospital's soul. Her assistant, David, was waiting with the materials she had requested. "I've compiled everything," he said, gesturing to neatly organized folders on the dining table. "Financial records, complaint histories, staff evaluations, and the information on Dr. Harmon's connections to the board." "What about Elena Diaz and her daughter?" Meryl asked, pouring herself a cup of tea. "Sophia came through surgery successfully," David reported. "The neurosurgeon was able to remove most of the tumor. Elena has agreed to provide a formal statement about Dr. Harmon's negligence." Meryl nodded, relieved about Sophia but still troubled by how close the girl had come to disaster. "And Frank, the stroke patient from today? Responding well to treatment." Dr. Chen followed him to the ER and made sure he received proper care. Within the critical window, the neurologist there confirmed it was indeed a stroke. If she hadn't intervened, Meryl didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. She sat at the table and began reviewing the documents, methodically building her case. The financial records revealed a disturbing pattern. Highland Memorial's operating costs had been cut by 15% over the past year, while executive bonuses had increased by 22%. Dr. Harmon had received the highest performance bonuses, directly tied to the number of patients he processed, not their outcomes or satisfaction. "These efficiency metrics," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet, "they're measuring the wrong things entirely. They're counting how many patients move through the system, not whether they're actually being helped." David nodded grimly. "And look." At this, he handed her another document. Dr. Harmon's brother-in-law, Richard Miles, joined the board 18 months ago. Since then, Harmon's authority has expanded significantly, and complaints against him have been systematically buried. As Meryl continued reviewing the evidence, her phone rang. It was Dr. Chen. "Ms. Streep," the young doctor began, her voice nervous but determined. "I wanted to thank you for your support today, and I have information you might find useful for tomorrow's meeting." "I'm listening," Meryl replied, grabbing a notepad. After you left, several staff members approached me. They have documentation, dates, times, patient names, of incidents where Dr. Harmon's negligence or discrimination led to delayed diagnoses or improper treatment. They've been too afraid to come forward until now. Would they be willing to testify at the board meeting? There was a pause. Some of them. Others are still concerned about retaliation. Tell them I will personally guarantee their positions, Meryl assured her. No one will face repercussions for telling the truth. After ending the call, Meryl turned to David. We need to contact everyone on this list, she said, indicating the hospital's board of directors. I want them all present tomorrow, no exceptions. Already done, David confirmed. Though Richard Miles tried to claim a scheduling conflict, Meryl's expression hardened slightly. Did you remind him that as the primary stakeholder, I have the authority to remove board members who fail in their fiduciary duties? I did, David replied with a small smile. He suddenly found his schedule clearing up. As the evening progressed, Meryl reached out to Elena Diaz, who provided a detailed account of her daughter's experience. The mother's voice trembled with emotion as she recounted Dr. Harmon's dismissive attitude and misdiagnosis. If Sophia hadn't collapsed right there in the parking lot, Elena's voice trailed off. But she did, Meryl said gently, and now she's getting the care she needs. Yes, but what about all the others? The ones who don't collapse at the right moment, who go home with serious conditions undiagnosed because doctors like Harmon won't listen? Meryl felt the weight of that question. That's exactly why tomorrow's meeting is so important, Elena. This isn't just about one doctor or one hospital. It's about standing up for the principle that everyone deserves equal care. After finishing her call with Elena, Meryl turned to the most difficult task, reviewing the patient outcomes. Behind the sterile data and statistics were real people, whose lives had been affected by Highland Memorial's broken system. In the past year alone, there had been 7 documented cases where delays in diagnosis or treatment had led to serious complications. 2 had resulted in deaths that might have been preventable. This stops tomorrow, Meryl said quietly, closing the file. She spent the next hour preparing her remarks for the board meeting, determining not just what she would say, but how she would say it. This would require all the skills she had honed through decades of bringing complex characters to life, the ability to convey authority and compassion simultaneously, to be firm without seeming vindictive, to make others understand, not just with their minds but with their hearts. Just before midnight, her phone rang again. It was Jackson Wells. Ms. Streep, he began, his voice uncharacteristically humble. I wanted to speak with you before tomorrow's meeting. There are certain contextual factors that I feel would be important for you to understand. Mr. Wells, Meryl interrupted calmly, I've spent the past 2 days experiencing your contextual factors firsthand. I've seen how patients are categorized and treated differently based on their perceived value. I've witnessed a doctor walk away from a stroke victim because he wasn't properly admitted. I've read complaints that were systematically buried under your direction. There was silence on the other end. However, she continued, I believe everyone deserves the opportunity to explain their actions. You'll have that chance tomorrow in front of the full board. After ending the call, Meryl walked to the window, looking out at the lights of the city. Her thoughts turned to her Aunt Eleanor, whose experience had inspired Highland Memorial in the first place. She had wanted to create a place where everyone received care with dignity and respect, where the fundamental worth of each human being was recognized, regardless of their status or circumstances. Somewhere along the way, that vision had been corrupted. But tomorrow she would reclaim it. A text message lit up her phone, a photo from Elena Diaz showing Sophia awake after surgery, giving a weak but determined thumbs up. Beneath it was a simple message. Thank you for fighting for us. Meryl smiled, feeling renewed purpose. The performance of her lifetime wouldn't be on screen or stage, but in a hospital boardroom, advocating for people who needed a voice. As she finally prepared for bed, she reviewed her notes one last time. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, certainly, but also the possibility of transformation. Highland Memorial could become what it was always meant to be, not just a hospital that treated illnesses, but one that honored the humanity of every person who walked through its doors. The Highland Memorial Hospital boardroom was unusually full that morning. Board members sat rigidly around the polished oak table, their faces a mixture of confusion and apprehension. Jackson Wells occupied his usual seat at the head, attempting to project calm authority, despite the beads of sweat visible on his forehead. In the corner, Dr. Victor Harmon stood with arms crossed, his typical arrogance now tempered with visible unease. Several staff members, including Dr. Chen and Nurse Sarah, had been invited to attend, sitting in chairs along the wall. Elena Diaz was there too, her presence a powerful reminder of what was at stake. At precisely 9 a.m., the double. Doors opened and Meryl Streep entered. Gone was any trace of Mary Stevens. Today she was dressed in a tailored navy suit that conveyed both elegance and authority. The room fell silent as she walked confidently to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from Wells. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "I've called this emergency meeting to address serious issues concerning the operation and management of Highland Memorial Hospital." Wells cleared his throat. "Mr. Streep, while we appreciate your concern and financial support, management decisions are typically handled by the majority stakeholder," Meryl finished for him, "which, as you're well aware, is me. This isn't simply financial support, Mr. Wells. This is my hospital." She opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. 8 years ago, I established Highland Memorial with a clear mission to provide compassionate, equitable care to all patients, regardless of their background or financial status. Her gaze swept the room, making eye contact with each board member. That mission has been betrayed. Richard Miles, Dr. Harmon's brother-in-law, shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Streep, these are serious allegations. Do you have specific concerns, or is this based on second-hand reports?" "Excellent question," Meryl replied. "For the past 3 days I've been a patient at this hospital, experiencing firsthand how it operates." Murmurs spread through the room as she continued. "I witnessed systematic discrimination based on perceived social status and financial worth. I saw life-threatening conditions dismissed without proper examination. I observed staff afraid to speak up about misconduct for fear of retaliation." She turned to Dr. Harmon. "Doctor, do you recognize me from somewhere other than magazine covers or films?" Harmon's jaw tightened. "You were a patient. You called yourself Mary Stevens. Yes, you spent exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds with me before dismissing my concerns and refusing to order appropriate tests. And I was one of the lucky ones." Meryl gestured toward Elena. "Ms. Diaz's daughter Sophia nearly died because you dismissed her neurological symptoms as teenage anxiety. A brain tumor, doctor. One that would have been immediately evident had you bothered to order basic tests." Harmon's face flushed. "One case doesn't define—" "It wasn't one case," Meryl interrupted, placing another folder on the table. "I've reviewed dozens of complaints that were systematically buried. Complaints that Mr. Wells marked NFA, no further action." Wells paled. "Those were handled according to protocol." "Protocol?" Meryl's voice sharpened. "Is it protocol to ignore a stroke victim in your lobby? Because he wasn't properly admitted. Is it protocol to threaten dedicated physicians like Dr. Chen when they put patient care above arbitrary rules?" She stood, commanding the room's complete attention. "I've also reviewed the financial records, efficiency metrics that reward rushing through patients, budget cuts to patient care while executive bonuses increased, rejection of qualified doctors who might have challenged the status quo." Richard Miles attempted to intervene. "Ms. Streep, with all due respect, running a hospital involves complex financial considerations. I understand complexity, Mr. Miles. What I don't understand is corruption." Her gaze fixed on him. "Such as a board member advancing his brother-in-law's career at the expense of patient safety." The room fell silent as the accusation hung in the air. "This isn't about financial considerations," Meryl continued, her voice now quieter but no less powerful. "This is about values, about whether we truly believe that every human being deserves to be treated with dignity and competence when they're at their most vulnerable." She turned to the staff members along the wall. "Dr. Chen, would you please share what happened yesterday with the stroke patient?" Dr. Chen stood, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Frank Williams, age 73, collapsed in the lobby showing clear signs of stroke. Dr. Harmon refused to assess him immediately, citing admission protocols. He walked away despite my informing him that we were losing the critical treatment window. "And what happened to Mr. Williams?" Meryl asked. "I stayed with him, initiated emergency protocols anyway, and accompanied him to the ER. The neurologist there confirmed an ischemic stroke. Because we eventually acted within the treatment window, his prognosis is now good, but had we followed Dr. Harmon's direction—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Dr. Harmon stepped forward. "This is a witch hunt. You can't judge an entire medical career on a few cherry-picked incidents. 7 patients with serious complications due to delayed diagnosis in the past year alone," Meryl countered. 2 deaths that independent review suggests might have been preventable. "These aren't cherry-picked incidents, Doctor. They're a pattern." She returned her attention to the board. "I founded Highland Memorial because my aunt was dismissed and misdiagnosed by a doctor who didn't think she was important enough to warrant proper care. I wanted to create a place where that would never happen to anyone else." Her voice softened with genuine emotion. "Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that mission. We began measuring success by efficiency metrics and profit margins rather than by lives improved and suffering alleviated." Jackson Wells, seeing his position crumbling, made one last attempt. "Miss Streep, perhaps there's room for compromise." "There is no compromise on fundamental values, Mr. Wells." Meryl's tone was final. "As of this moment, I am exercising my authority as majority stakeholder to implement immediate changes." She outlined her decisions with unwavering clarity. "Doctor, Harmon would be suspended pending a full review of his cases. Jackson Wells would step down as administrator. Richard Miles would resign from the board immediately. An independent ethics committee would be established to review complaints and ensure proper standards of care. Additionally," she continued, "Dr. Chen will be appointed interim head of neurology, and we will immediately reinstate the application process for qualified candidates like Dr. Anita Sharma." The boardroom remained silent as Meryl concluded, "Highland Memorial was founded on the principle that everyone deserves equal access to quality healthcare delivered with compassion and respect. Today, we begin the process of reclaiming that mission." Dr. Harmon, his face now ashen, looked directly at Meryl. "You can't do this. I have a contract that includes ethical practice standards you've repeatedly violated," Meryl replied calmly. "But you're right about one thing, Doctor. This isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting patients." As the meeting concluded, Meryl approached Elena Diaz, who had tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," Elena whispered. "Not just for Sophia, but for everyone who wouldn't have had a voice." Meryl squeezed her hand gently. "It's what Highland Memorial was always meant to be, and now it will be." As she left the boardroom, staff members lined the hallway, many with tears in their eyes. The revelation had come, and with it, the promise of transformation. The weeks following the emergency board meeting brought swift and significant changes to Highland Memorial Hospital. Meryl had remained in town, temporarily setting aside film projects to personally oversee the transformation of the institution she had founded. The day after the meeting, Dr. Harmon's office was cleared out. He had submitted his resignation rather than face a formal review, though the medical board was still conducting an independent investigation into his practices. Jackson Wells had also resigned, along with Richard Miles and 2 other board members who had been complicit in the hospital's toxic culture. Meryl sat in what had been Wells's office, now temporarily her own, reviewing applications for the new hospital administrator position. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called. Dr. Chen entered, looking tired but energized. As interim head of neurology, she had been working tirelessly to review cases and establish new departmental guidelines. "The ethics committee has finished their initial audit," she reported, placing a folder on the desk. "They've identified 43 cases from the past year that require follow-up care. We've already contacted 30 of those patients to schedule immediate appointments." Meryl nodded, relieved that the process of healing had begun. "And how are the staff responding to the changes?" "Honestly, with a mixture of hope and skepticism, Dr. Chen admitted. They've seen promising changes before, that eventually reverted to old patterns. They're waiting to see if this time will be different. It will be, Meryl assured her. We're not just changing policies, we're changing the culture. The most visible symbol of that cultural shift was the newly established Patient Advocacy Office, staffed by healthcare professionals whose sole responsibility was ensuring quality care for all patients. An anonymous reporting system had been implemented, allowing staff to flag concerns without fear of retaliation. Later that afternoon, Meryl visited Sophia Diaz, who was recovering in the pediatric ward after her second surgery. The neurosurgeon had successfully removed the remaining tumor tissue, and her prognosis was now excellent. Ms. Streep. Sophia's face lit up when Meryl entered the room. Since the revelation of Meryl's identity, the young girl had been starstruck, especially after learning Meryl had arranged for the top pediatric neurosurgeon in the country to consult on her case. Elena was sitting beside her daughter's bed, looking more rested than when Meryl had last seen her. "We can never thank you enough," she said, grasping Meryl's hand. "I should be thanking you," Meryl replied. "Your willingness to speak up made a crucial difference." "The nurses say the hospital feels different already," Eleanor commented. "They actually have time to talk to patients now, not just rush from one room to the next." Meryl smiled. One of her first actions had been to review staffing levels and adjust patient loads to ensure quality care wasn't sacrificed for efficiency. It had required additional investment, but the preliminary results were promising. "I have something to ask you," Meryl said to Elena. "We're forming a patient experience advisory council composed of former patients and family members. Your perspective would be invaluable." Elena looked surprised. "Me? But I don't have any special qualifications." "You have the most important qualification," Meryl assured her. "You understand what it means to be vulnerable, to need care and to be dismissed. That knowledge is essential to building a better hospital." After leaving Sophia's room, Meryl made her way to the rehabilitation wing, where Frank Williams, the stroke patient, was making remarkable progress. His wife Margaret greeted Meryl warmly. "The therapists say he's recovering faster than expected," she reported proudly. "Dr. Chen visits every day to check on him." Frank, whose speech was already improving, managed a clear "thank you." Meryl shook her head gently. "I should be thanking Dr. Chen and the staff who stood up for you. They're the true heroes in this story." "But without you," Margaret pointed out, "they might never have had the chance to be heroes." The truth of that statement resonated with Meryl as she continued her rounds of the hospital. Healthcare professionals didn't lack compassion or commitment. They needed a system that supported those values rather than punishing them. That evening, Meryl met with Dr. Anita Sharma, whose application had been reinstated and expedited. The brilliant young neurologist would be joining Highland Memorial the following month. "I have to admit, I was hesitant when I received your call," Dr. Sharma confessed over dinner. "After my previous experience with this hospital, I wasn't eager to revisit the opportunity." "Understandable," Meryl acknowledged. "But I hope you've seen enough today to believe that real change is happening." Dr. Sharma nodded thoughtfully. The staff spoke freely about problems and solutions. That kind of transparency is rare in hospital settings. "It's essential," Meryl replied. "No institution can improve if people are afraid to identify what's broken." As they discussed Dr. Sharma's innovative approaches to community neurological care, Meryl felt a growing confidence that Highland Memorial would not only recover from its recent failings, but emerge as a model for other healthcare institutions. The following morning brought another important milestone. Meryl had gathered the entire hospital staff, from surgeons to custodians, in the auditorium for an unprecedented town hall meeting. Every shift had representation, with a second session planned for night staff. "I'm not here to lecture you," Meryl began, standing on the stage without a podium or microphone, preferring a more intimate connection. "I'm here to listen. You're the ones who do the real work of this hospital every day. You see what works and what doesn't." For the next 2 hours, staff members stepped forward to share their experiences, frustrations, and hopes. A veteran nurse, described how scheduling pressures had forced her to cut corners she never would have accepted earlier in her career. An orderly explained how equipment shortages affected patient comfort and dignity. A young doctor confessed his struggle to balance efficiency demands with thorough patient care. Meryl listened to each person with the same focused attention she brought to studying a complex character, occasionally asking questions, but mostly absorbing their perspectives. When everyone who wished to speak had done so, she addressed the room again. "Today marks a new beginning for Highland Memorial," she said, "not because I say so, but because together we're choosing to reclaim the mission that should have guided us all along." She outlined the changes already implemented and those still to come. Better staffing ratios, revised performance metrics that prioritized patient outcomes over volume, training programs focused on equitable care, and an overhauled governance structure with frontline staff representation. But policies and procedures are just tools, she emphasized. The real transformation happens in moments of individual choice, when you decide to spend extra time with a frightened patient, when you question a diagnosis that doesn't seem right, when you speak up about something that concerns you. As the meeting concluded, Nurse Sarah, who had earlier confided her fears about reporting problems, approached Meryl with tears in her eyes. "For the first time in years," she said quietly, "I'm proud to work here again." That sentiment, more than any policy change or personnel decision, told Meryl that Highland Memorial was on the right path, becoming the hospital she had always envisioned, where healing encompassed not just medical treatment, but genuine human care. 6 months had passed since Meryl Streep revealed her identity at Highland Memorial Hospital. On this bright autumn morning, she stood at the podium outside the hospital's main entrance, preparing to address the crowd gathered for the opening of the new Patient Dignity Center. The media presence was substantial, not just local outlets but national networks, drawn by the remarkable story of one of Hollywood's most acclaimed actresses going undercover to investigate and transform her own hospital. Meryl, however, had insisted that today's focus remain on the hospital's mission, not her celebrity. Behind her stood the hospital staff, united in a way they hadn't been in years. Dr. Chen, now permanently appointed as Chief of Neurology, stood proudly with her team. The newly hired hospital administrator, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a nationally recognized healthcare reformer known for her work in equitable care, stood beside the restructured board of directors, which now included 2 former patients and 3 frontline healthcare workers. 6 months ago, Meryl began, her voice clear and strong. Highland Memorial recommitted to its founding principle that every patient deserves exceptional care delivered with compassion and respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from. She gestured toward the new wing behind her. The Patient Dignity Center we're opening today isn't just a building. It's a promise that we will train healthcare providers, not just in medical techniques, but in the equally important art of seeing the whole person before them. The center would serve as both a training facility for medical professionals and a research hub focused on developing best practices for equitable healthcare. It would also house the expanded patient advocacy office and community health outreach programs. True transformation, Meryl continued, doesn't happen overnight. It happens one interaction at a time, one decision at a time, one life at a time. She stepped aside, inviting Elena Diaz to the podium. As the chair of the Patient Experience Advisory Council, Elena had become a powerful voice for change at Highland Memorial. "When my daughter Sophia first came to this hospital," Elena said, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "we were treated as inconveniences. Today I bring patients' concerns directly to hospital leadership, and they listen." Sophia, now fully recovered, sat in the front row, beaming at her mother. Beside her was Frank Williams, the stroke patient whose case had been the catalyst for Meryl's revelation. Though he still walked with a cane, his recovery had exceeded all expectations. After the formal ceremony, Meryl walked through the hospital corridors, observing the subtle but significant changes that had taken place. Gone was the stark division between VIP areas and general waiting rooms. The reception staff now greeted every patient with the same respect and attention. Nurses moved purposefully but no longer frantically, having adequate time to attend to patients properly. In the pediatric ward, Meryl stopped to chat with a young nurse who was reading to a child while monitoring his IV. 6 months ago, her scene would have been unlikely. Staff had been too rushed to provide this kind of emotional support. "How are things really going?" Meryl asked her. "Not the official version, but the ground truth." The nurse smiled. "It's not perfect. Healthcare never is. But now when there's a problem, we can actually say something without fear. And people listen." That sentiment was echoed throughout the hospital. The anonymous reporting system had identified and resolved dozens of issues, from medication protocols to scheduling problems. More importantly, the hospital's culture had shifted to one where speaking up was valued rather than punished. Dr. Anita Sharma had revolutionized the neurology department, implementing community outreach programs that had already identified several patients with treatable conditions who might otherwise have gone undiagnosed until their symptoms became severe. Her work embodied the preventive, equitable approach that Highland Memorial now championed. As Meryl prepared to leave, she was due on set for her next film project the following week. She made one final stop at the hospital's small chapel, a quiet space for reflection. She wasn't expecting to find anyone there, but seated in the back row was an elderly man she didn't recognize. He turned as she entered, and his eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Streep," he said softly, "I hoped I might meet you today." "Please call me Meryl," she replied, sitting beside him. "Were you at the ceremony?" He nodded. "My name is Thomas. I was a patient here 3 weeks ago. Heart attack." He patted his chest. "Second one, actually. The first was a year ago, also at this hospital." "How was your experience?" Meryl asked. "Like night and day," Thomas replied. "Last year I felt like a burden, just another old man taking up space. This time I was treated like a person whose life mattered." His simple description encapsulated everything Meryl had worked to achieve. "That's exactly what we've been trying to change," Thomas smiled. "The young doctor who treated me, Dr. Chen, she told me you were the reason for the transformation, said you went undercover as a patient to see the truth for yourself." Meryl nodded, slightly uncomfortable with the focus on her role. "It seemed the only way to really understand." "I've seen all your movies," Thomas continued. "You've played queens and prime ministers, iron-willed editors and determined whistleblowers. But what you did here," he gestured around the chapel, "this is your greatest role." Meryl was touched by his sincerity. "Thank you, Thomas, but the real heroes are the healthcare workers who show up every day with compassion, even when the system makes it difficult." As she finally left Highland Memorial, that afternoon, Meryl reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The hospital's transformation had required substantial investment, both financial and human, but the results were undeniable. Patient satisfaction scores had risen dramatically. Staff turnover had decreased. Most importantly, health outcomes had improved, particularly for patients from underserved communities. The story had garnered national attention, with other healthcare institutions now looking to Highland Memorial as a model for reform. What had begun as one actress's personal mission had sparked a broader conversation about equity in healthcare. In her car, Meryl found a small gift box with a note from the hospital staff. Inside was a simple silver pin in the shape of the hospital's logo, along with a card signed by hundreds of employees. The message was simple: "Thank you for helping us remember why we do this work." Meryl pinned it to her lapel, a reminder that her most meaningful performance hadn't been captured on film or recognized with awards. It had been the quiet work of reclaiming a vision of healthcare where every person was treated with dignity, where a hospital truly served as a place of healing for all who entered its doors. As Highland Memorial faded from view in her rear view, Meryl knew the transformation would continue without her daily presence. The systems were in place, the culture was shifting, and most importantly, the people who brought the hospital to life each day were fully invested in its renewed mission. The true measure of success wouldn't be found in statistics or recognition, but in countless moments of compassionate care that would unfold in the days, months, and years to come, each one a confirmation that no one is just a patient and everyone deserves to be seen.